Hello everyone and welcome to Scottish Summit 2021. At this session we will talk about portals and more specifically about benefits and dangers of PowerApps Portal Web API. Before we begin, let me say a big thank you to our sponsors: ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proxima 3, Redspire, Agilysys and Hitachi Solution. Thank you so much to help to bring this event to life. Now let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Oleksandr Olashyn and I am Microsoft Business Application MVP and MCT. I'm currently working as CRM architect at TreeShape. My hobbies include dancing and coding. You can find me in various social media using my alias Dancing with CRM, including LinkedIn and Twitter. You can also check out my blog dancingwithcrm.com when I'm writing about Dynamics 365, Power Platform, Azure, and everything in between. Also, you can check out my GitHub profile when I'm posting samples of my PCF components, different code samples, and various sessions from different conferences. Now, without further ado, let's get started. We will start with introduction to PowerApps portals before Web API. We will learn what is classical approach to work with it and what their benefits and limitations. Then we will move to Web API and we will learn what its purpose is, what operations are available for us, how security works with it, and then we will review some code samples. Then we will move to demo when I will share a couple of usage scenarios and also review benefits and dangers of working with the Web API. And then we will end with Q&A session. What is PowerApps Portals? Well, PowerApps Portals is a local platform from Microsoft to help you build stunning websites that give your users, both internal and external, secure access to your Dataverse data. It has visual editor with drag and drop interface to allow you build pages really fast and easy. It also gives you access to HTML code to support more complex scenarios. Now, you might think that PowerApps Portals is a new product, but it actually has really long history. It all started in 2019 with ADX Studio Portals. Then in 2015, Microsoft bought ADX Studio, including their ADX Studio Portals. And in 2016, it rebranded it and presented it as Dynamics Portal add-on. Fast forward 3 years, and in 2019, PowerApps Portals were introduced as a rebranded, more complex and robust version of Dynamics Portal. Since 2019, PowerApps Portal is full part of Power Platform family. Now, there are a lot of benefits of PowerApps Portals, but I will highlight just a few. So the main point of it is native integration with Dataverse Power Platform. And I'm not talking just about Dataverse to expose your information. It also natively integrates with Power BI, so you can easily and securely share the data from Power BI. It also has a native multi-language support based on dynamic translation capabilities. It has good website security and allows you to manage on granular level which records and which pages are accessible by which users. It also has extensive support for local and external authentication, including providers like Google, LinkedIn, but also Azure AD and OpenID Connect, to name a few. Now, let's see what are classical ways to work with a portal before Web API. Let's start with entity forms. And entity forms are one of the core configuration of the portal. You can use them as extension of your regular Dataverse forms, meaning that you create Dataverse form and then configure entity form to render either the whole form or just a part of it on the portal. It has a lot of benefits because you can easily reuse your existing forms, but also you can use your familiar visual editor to create forms in the Dataverse and then just render them on the portal. Entity Forms also has additional configurations like attaching file, geolocation and stuff like that. Next thing is Entity List, and similarly to Entity Forms, you can use them as an extensions of the Dataverse views. Again, you just create a Dataverse view and then configure Entity List to show it. Entity list also supports showing multiple views using the view selector, but it needs to be the views from the same entity. Again, similarly to entity forms, entity lists have additional configurations, like configuring running workflow on the records or downloading data in Excel, etc. Next things is an extension of entity list, and it's called entity list of data. Basically, it allows you to create a read-only endpoint, meaning URL, that you can call and get the data about some entity. So, for example, you configure your entity list for product, and then you checkbox for entity list of data, and you will have the URL that you can call that will return you the list of the product. Now, the issue with this is that it's completely anonymous, meaning that you cannot apply any security to it, and any user of the portal, even if it's anonymous user, can access the data from it. So, and it's highlighted in the documentation. You shouldn't use it to expose any data that have some security considerations, and it should be used only for something like product lists or stuff that should be available for everyone freely. Now let's move from low code configuration thing to more code heavy thing. And the main superpower of the portal is a Liquid. Liquid is an open source template language, meaning that it allows you to write templates for your HTML web page. It will be executed on the server side, meaning no part of the Liquid will be available on the client. This allows you to actually select which part of the page should be rendered. That have you additional benefit on not just hiding part of the page from anonymous users, but not render them at all, meaning that using inspector on any other things, you cannot find the things that shouldn't belong to the page. By extension, it also allows you to have some custom objects and properties that are not usually available in the HTML. Microsoft extended it to have portal-specific objects like entities, entity lists, or fetch.xml that allow you to perform more complex operations. Speaking of fetch.xml, it should be familiar for everyone that worked with the Dataverse for a long time. Fetch.xml is a language of requests that allow you to fetch the data from the system. You can generate fetch.xml in a similar fashion as you do usually, either by going to Advanced Find and downloading fetch.xml for your specific use, or writing it manually, or using the tools like fetch.xml Builder. Fetch.xml allow you to enrich your pages with the data that will be fetched on the fly when the pages render, and then use in viewing or calculations or for whatever reason you would need. Now all of this is standard configurations that are available for you out of the box, but there is more alternative approach to work with the portal as well. Now those alternative methods can be defined, or more precise, separated into distinct groups, and bear in mind this is virtual distinction. So first of all is group of companion app style, and it's not some programmatic method, or it's more like a way how you build your things. So companion app is any web service that you host and you fully control outside of the portal, that from the portal you can access either through some call or other ways, and receive and send data back. Common approach in this is either use Azure Function or Power Automate Flow to get the data from and to Dataverse instance, which can be really useful but also requires a development. And another way is to use building capabilities of the portal, which includes using web templates combination with fetch.xml. So web templates is the portal way of defining web page. So you basically define what should be rendered. You can create a web template that only has a fetch.xml, then can receive some parameters via the URL and fetch the data that need, and then render it as a JSON. So basically you create your mini web API to receive the data. Based upon this is more complicated approach of triggering some data and sending some data back via CDS actions and plugins. So basically you create either a custom entity or something like that, and register plugin for retrieve of that specific entity, and that allows you to perform some specific actions. Now it's a more complicated approach and not that widely used, but still has its own advantages. Now, right now we covered all the main traditional approach to work with Web API, and now you might see the main limitation of it, which is that there is no possibility of submitting data back to the system outside the entity forms. So yeah, as you might notice, entity forms are the only things that actually submitting data back. Now, of course, you can create your companion app or, flow or whatever, but it will live separately outside of the portal and need additional control and configuration. That's why Web API is so a big deal. So what is Web API? Well, basically Web API is a set of endpoints that you configure that allow you to extend user experience and UI of the portal. Yes, you hear that right. The main purpose of the Web API is allow you to build richer and more complex user experience on the portal. It's not suitable for integration purpose. Again, let me move myself. Yep, that's better. It's not for integration purpose. That's because Web API live only inside the portal, meaning that you can call it when you inside the portal, but cannot call it outside. So again, not suitable for integration. Now, when you will have a Web API? Well, your portal version should be higher than 9.2.6.41, which most portals are already higher than that. But still, if your portal is not on that version, to use Web API, you would need to update. And Microsoft tried to make the syntax of the Web API as similar to your regular Dataverse API as possible. And being honest, they did a pretty good job in that one. If you used to work with Dataverse Web API, it will be pretty familiar experience for you. Now let's move to the Web API operations. So, let me move myself. Yeah, that's better. So, what operations are available in the Web API? So, we can create new records, we can delete existing one or properties of existing records, we can edit existing records and their properties, we can also perform associate and disassociate operations. So one from you who work with different type of Web API might notice that this doesn't have full CRUD operation list when CRUD states from create, read, update, delete, and this one is missing read operations. Well, there is no at least documented official statement from Microsoft why we are missing the read capabilities, but most of us assume that that's because we already have fetch XML, so we can easily fetch the data from the systems that we need. Of course, in the future that would need to be updated because fetch XML is server side and Web API is mostly to have capability to do it on the client side. Also because Portal at some point in the future will support PCF components, that would be needed part because they heavily rely on capability to read the data from the system. Of course, there are some limitations with API. Web API doesn't support working with portal configuration entities like web pages, web templates, etc. This is because they are configuration only things and shouldn't be changed and tempered from the client side anyway. Of course, at this moment, because it's still in preview, API doesn't block their usage, so you can, in theory, update some data with Web API. But please don't do it because in the future, as soon as it will become generally available, this will be fully deprecated and all of the shady things to change things on the fly will be removed. Other things that Web API doesn't support is file and image type fields. And this is sort of understandable because Portal in general doesn't support those fields. So if you create, for example, Dataverse form and then create entity form based on that, and that form will have file or image type field, it won't be rendered and you will have an error. Also, you cannot fetch those fields with fetch XML, so it's understandable, but hope it will be supported soon. The next topic that we need to talk is security, because you just don't want to be your APIs that can change the data in the system to be unsecure. So first thing that it's entity permissions. So entity permissions is a portal way of managing what should be uh, available for the user in specific security role. So you can use them as similarly to the standard Dataverse entity permissions. You can configure that user can read, write, create, associate, append, and append to on your entity permission level. So if you configure that user cannot create some record or cannot update them in entity permissions, if he will perform web API request to do so, he will receive an error. The next layer of security is CSRF token. CSRF stands for Cross-Site Reference Forgery Token. The main thing you need to know about this is the way of validate that this request is actually coming from the portal itself and it's valid request. You don't need to think how exactly this token is generated or what its lifespan is. In the standard code wrapper that Microsoft provides us to use Web API, there is a part that generates and updates the token as needed. So you just need to know that it exists and highly. You just need to know that it exists and it highly improves security of the portal. The last thing is GDPR compliance. Of course, you don't want your Web API operations, either creation or modification, or especially deletion, to be untracked. If you work with a portal previously and check the audit log, you know that by default, portal will perform all operation as a system user. So you cannot see who exactly did the change unless you implement some additional logic. Now with the Web API it won't be that easy but also possible. But because it won't be fully GDPR compliant, Microsoft steps forward and by default include ID of the contact in all of your requests if applicable. And you can see it in changes in Office 365 Compliance Center. Yes, this is really important. You still won't be able to see those changes inside the audit log in your Dataverse, but you will be able to see it in the audit log in Office 365 Compliance Center. Now let's talk about configurations. So to configure Web API, for now there is no fancy user interface. You need to work with good old site settings. So for the one who doesn't know, site settings is records in your Dataverse that configure portal behavior and allow or disallow some features. So to enable entity, first you need to create site settings with the next name, web API / entity name / enable. If you don't create the settings, this entity won't be available to be used in Web API. But this setting alone is not enough. You can granularly select which fields should be acceptable and accessible in Web API, which is really important from security standpoint. So you need to create a new site setting called Web API / your entity name / fields, and as a value provide a list of fields logical name, comma separated, or use asterisk for all attributes. Now this one is not the best idea if we are talking about production instances specifically, because it will allow access to all attributes, but it might be acceptable during the development or in the entities that doesn't have really big importance from security standpoint. Last but certainly not the least is the Web API inner error site setting. This one allows to show on the portal inner error of what exactly happened, which greatly improves traceability of the error and help you as a developer to fix it faster. Now, if you don't like to mess up with site settings manually, or especially if you are not a fan of providing the list of acceptable fields and searching for their schema names, as usual, you got covered in XRM Toolbox. So this tool was created by Omar Zarour, and I'm really sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, sorry. And it allows you to create all necessary site settings, including enabling entities and attributes from one convenient app, and you don't need to remember the schema names, you can just select them from the list. And also it allows you to generate code snippets, which is really useful. Now let's have a more deep dive into configuration. So how exactly will you call your web API? Well, you need to perform a specific request to this URL. So it consists of four main parts. So this is protocol, it's only HTTPS, so it's secured. Then the base URL of your portal, then underscore API. Now, if you use Dataverse API, you might notice that this one is a bit different because we are not specifying the version of the web API. For now, there is no documentation or any rumors that this will be changed and it will be similar to the current Dataverse web API, and I think this approach is much cleaner, that you don't need to remember a specific version. And last, you need to provide the name of the resource. Now, and this is really important, the name of the resource in this case would be not the name of the entity, but the name of the entity set. And what's the difference between entity set and the entity name? Well, as you can see, it's not contact, but contacts entity name set. So for account, it will be accounts. Keep in mind that if your entity ends on S, it will be different. So you would need to check in the metadata for entity set a logical name collection property to find out the proper name of your entity set. So, So when you call your web API, you also need to provide the proper type of the call, which used for different operations. So right now there is four of them. So you're using post for create entities and calling action. You are using patch to update entities or doing abstract operation. You perform delete when you delete entities or individual properties. For example, you're cleaning something as a lookup. And put when you update individual properties of entity and other limited situation. So again, four types: post, patch, delete, and put. And you need to provide them. So let's see how actual code look like. So on the screen right now, you can see Web API wrapper that provided by Microsoft. So you don't need to remember it, you can just copy paste it from the official documentation page, but let's take a deeper look in it. So one of the things that I mentioned previously was about CSRF token. So this part is responsible for generating getting the token and adding it to all of your requests or updating it if it's already expired. And also you might notice that the result of it will be safeAjax object. So to call Web API, you would need to call webapi.safeAjax and provide the proper parameters. And as you can see, it will just perform standard Ajax request. So right now on the screen, you can see the simple request to Web API to create an account. So you are using webapi.safeAjax and then you provide an object with Ajax options. If you don't know what exactly is in Ajax options, don't worry, this should cover the basis, but if you're still not sure, you can always Google Ajax options object and it's pretty standard. So first you need to provide the type of the operation. One of the types that I mentioned previously: post, put, delete, and patch. In this case, because we want to create a new account, we will use post. Then you need to provide the relative URL. As you can see, it's only the last part, so with API and the entity name set. Again, it's entity name set, not just the entity logical name. Then you need to provide content type, and this will be always application JSON, because right now the API only supports this type of data. Maybe in the future it will support other types, but for now only application JSON is supported. Then you need to provide data itself. In this case, as you can see, we stringify JSON, which is basically just the name of our account. And there we have two optional parameters: success, as you can see on the screen, and missing on the screen is error parameter to handle the error. And again, the similar functions, the results, the status, and the request itself. So, pretty straightforward. Now, if you don't like to remembering all these types and providing the relative URLs and content types, uh, you got covered. So, Microsoft MVP, King, and again, sorry if I did pronounce it wrong, created a library called XRM Portal.js, which allows you to perform various operations that are pretty common on the portal, like hiding and showing fields, but also in the latest revision, he added Web API support. So instead of remembering what type you need to provide, you, and don't forget to include content JSON, you can just use it as you usually use in the Dataverse. So you can call xrm.portal.webapi and then create record or update record or delete record and relative information and two optional parameters to handle the results or error. Okay, that's it. Now you know what Web API is and how you can configure it. Let's move to the demo to see how you can use it in real life. Okay, so right now we are on my demo portal and this is just a regular starter portal. Now let's see what WebIP can do. Common scenario in different websites is to create contact us page, basically a simple way to provide either feedback or register for something. Now portal also includes this page by default, not in starter template, but for example in customer self-service or in partner portal templates. Now usually that's a separate page with a standard entity forms that will point out either to lead or contact or even to custom entity if you prefer to. Now this is not that useful in many situations because modern experience is more robust and for example you want the user to be able to contact us about specific product when they are on product page and when they are still viewing it. So having the small widget or something like pop-up window, it's much more convenient. Before Web API, do so would be really hard, but right now we can do it. So let me move myself, that's better. Okay, so I created a small contact us button that if we click has a simple form that has three main fields, first name, last name and email. And this form, when we will hit submit, will create a prospect entity. Now this is a custom entity that I created and only for purpose of this demo. So as you can see, it already have some data, but we don't have any Scottish Summit in here. So let's create one. Also, notice that I am not signed in the portal yet. So you can configure some things to be done by anonymous users as well, which is really useful and convenient. So let's type Scottish Summit. We have it, great. So last name, let's say demo, shall we? And email, let it be test@demo.com. Okay, we hit submit, sending, it's a success, great, let's verify. So here, prospects, hit refresh, great, we have Scottish Summit created immediately. So this is great and much increase what you can do with your portal. Now let's see how exactly I build this button and how simple it is. So first of all, let me move myself here again. So first of all, let's start with the site settings. So as I said previously, you need to enable entity to be available for the Web API. So I created the next site settings to enable this entity. Web API / DVC prospect / enabled with value true. And then I configured the list of fields that will be supported by Web API via Web API / DVC prospect / fields. So, and here is the list. So we are supporting only three fields: DVC first name, DVC last name, DVC email. Great so far. Also, I configured error setting, Web API /error /inner error, set it to true. Notice this one needs to be configured only once to be able to use it to handle errors. Okay, after we configure our site setting, let's see how exactly I did the button. For it, I created a content snippet. Now, for users who never use the portal, Content snippets are a reusable piece of code that you can easily embed in other web templates. It's pretty useful. So let's see. So we have some CSS code, which again can be whatever you want. You can style the button on everything because it's just pure HTML. Then we have our Web API wrapper directly from Microsoft. Now you can embed it with your content snippet. You can also embed it directly in header to be available on all pages. In production in real life, I would embed it just on the header to be available on all pages. But for the purpose of the demo, I will embed it with content snippet. And then some function to view, and this is the main one that we care about, create prospect. So, as you can see, we are fetching the data, and then the main part is Web API request itself. Now, I know that previously I said that there is an easier way to do it, like XRM Portal.js, which is have more convenient syntax, but for the purpose of demo and to show you, let's say, native experience, because not everyone would like to use third-party library, I will use just whatever Microsoft provides us with. So, we are performing request web-api.saveAjax. Then we are providing the type of request. Again, as I mentioned previously, there is 4 types of them for different operations. Because we want to create a new prospect, we will use post. Then the URL underscore API slash DVC prospects. Again, reminder that this is the entity set, not the entity name. So be aware of it. Then content type, application JSON. Then as a data, we're providing the object with the fields and their values. And then we are handling success and error. So pretty straightforward. As you can see, that's all what we need. And it works just fine. And there's just some HTML for the form itself. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward, nothing complicated, but the user experience is much better right now. Okay, let's move to another example. So it's pretty common. Oh yeah, I need to sign in for the next example. Because of security is important. Okay, so it's pretty common for you to show some lists of data on your portal and websites in general. In this example, we are showing just a list of devices, so we have like DeLorean, Pokeball, Pokédex, Portal Gun, TARDIS, etc. So pretty useful items, huh? But it's pretty common scenarios that you would need to go and modify them. Now, if you're just using the standard entity list, as I do right now, we would need to click on any one of those and modify them, hit submit, and it will be updated, of course, but this means that user would need to hit every one of those and hit submit every time. And in these scenarios, which is just unacceptable. Previously, before Web API, it would be a hard task to do, but right now it's possible. So let's see how it's done. So in this example, I will use Excel. I will create Excel-like experience, but basically everything you can do. So you can fetch the data however you want and present them in the list. So in this case, it's a reminder of Excel, so you can move, etc. So let's see, I want DeLorean to move back, and I want Pokeball, let's say, not Pokeball, but Master Ball, because why not? Okay, and change the serial number for this one to 111, to 1111. Okay, great, and hit save. Okay, so records updated successfully. Let's check it out in the system. Is it true or not? Okay, so we now have Master Ball as for instead of a Pokeball, and we have all ones for the Pokédex. Great, so it works. Now let's see how this was done. So again, everything starts with the site settings, so we need to enable our entity. And in similar fashion, I enable device entity and then fields, name and serial number in this case. As you can see, error don't need to be enabled because we enabled it previously. And then in web template, I created specific web template for our error. Now notice that this is not, devices. Yeah, notice that this time it was not a content snippet but a web template because it was easier for me to create completely separate page with it, but it can be also content snippet if you want. So to make this experience Excel-like experience to life, I was using third-party library called GXL. It's pretty useful, but you can just use standard tables and just pure JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So HTML. So first of all, we are fetching a list of devices. Now this is important because we need to somehow get the list. This example, I'm fetching using fetch XML liquid template, and as you can see, I'm fetching name, serial number, and ID. I'm filtering only by active devices, but you can provide additional filters if necessary. Again, for the purpose of the demo, I'm including Ajax wrapper with the page. And now let's see how exactly I'm saving contact. So this one is a bit different operation, so we are updating data, not creating it. So our URL will be different. So in this case, URL will be API devices, again entity set, and then ID of the device that we want to update. So in this case, we are performing operation item by item, meaning that you still cannot perform operations in bulk, so you cannot create, for example, one big object with all update for all data. No, you would need to call and point for each and every item. And we are providing the updated fields. So again, I'm using save Ajax. Notice the type this time is patch because we are updating data. Again, the same content type application JSON, and URL was here, basically URL with ID, and then again handling success and errors if applicable. And as notice, we are going row by row for change data. So we are again, we are not performing bulk update, and we are performing operation by operation. Okay, so again, this is quite straightforward, and we will not go into rendering of the table itself because that's not important. So right now you know what a web API can do, and I can show multiple other examples, but I think this should give you pretty good overview. Now let's focus. Now you see the benefits of web API. You can create more stunning and more complex visual experience for the users, but there is some dangers as well. So first dangers that I would like to point out is abusing web API. Don't get me wrong, web API is great, but what I fear about is that users will start to abuse it. And what I mean by that is that instead of creating, for example, forms and using standard functionality, they will start to use it web API instead. I know that it's easier, and especially if you're a developer, to control everything, to create everything from top to bottom exactly as you want. And I get it. But the main benefit of the portal is the easy of customization, that you can just use existing, for example, forms to swap the data and easily be able to do the things that you cannot do with web API. So simple example, let's say we want to create a new device, right? And we want to, except from name and serial number, start asking new data. So with the web API, what we would need to do is we would need to not only add the fields to the site setting, so we would start with the site setting, right? We would go here, and in web API, we would need to, in the list of available fields for device, add new fields. Then, in our custom form, we would need to create those fields, and then we would need to make sure that they are correct and have proper values. With standard form, we just change the entity form for device to the new one, or add just fields in an editor, and that's it. So let me show you how easy it is for the entity form, for example. So let's say we have the new form here. It's loading. Okay, so we have standard web create form, right? Let me show you this. Okay, so as you can see, standard form, name, serial number, and account. And for example, let's say we created a new form that have additional fields, like for example, type and message and stuff like that. In the in here, in the entity form configuration, it's pretty straightforward. We just choose different form, hit save, clear the cache, and voila, Portal rendered additional fields as we need to. To do the same with our form would need us to add the fields in the site setting as I showed previously, but also to add fields to the form and then update also JavaScript to submit those fields. But for example, if we have, for example, type field, right? So we would need to add select. We would need to make sure that we added all the proper values. So it just makes things more complicated. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Like there is a scenarios, of course, when you need more complex UI, obviously, and not just for contact us. For example, you have one form that you will not update frequently that definitely need to have some stunning visuals or complicated changes or stuff like that because your company demands it and I understand it. And with standard forms, it's hard to do. And you can use the API in that context, obviously. But again, consider when you're using it, not abuse it. It to extend UI, not fully deprecate the old UI. Second thing that I want to point out is working with errors and handling the errors. So, for example, you need to extend your device create form, right? And you added not only new fields, but also some restrictions. For example, serial number now can only have 10 symbols. Now, if you're using standard form, you just type and it's just stop you. So it implemented this restriction. But when you created your custom form, you forgot, right? Or somebody forgot to tell you. So when right now you're testing it, for example, I want to create device 1, and let's see, you have short serial, you hit submit, everything works fine. So you can see that in device list, we have this device, great. But if during testing, you didn't test it properly, right? And user tries to create device with longer serial number, hit submit, and you didn't provide error tracing. What will happen is that he will be stuck. So, and you see, there is just one failed to load resource that requests to this resource, but nothing actually happens, and user might be confused. And if you work with Portal, especially as a consultant, Portal handles errors not exactly great, but also not that bad. So what I mean by that is that usually Portal will show what actually went wrong and also create an error log in Azure if you enable this possibility in Portal. So you need to be more conscious about working with Web API to prevent those errors. So in this example, what you can do is just extend your web template or content snippet, again, depends, to handle errors more properly because you can do it. So what I'm doing right now is if request goes wrong, I can just log an error. Now, of course, for this example, I'm just logging it, but in real life, you can create a file that the user can download. So or you can even show the user name of the error. So, and as you can see, error. Of course, it's again not that useful because users still don't understand what's happened, but at least he understands that something went wrong more immediately. And because I enabled inner error in the log, I can see what exactly is wrong. So a validation error occurred, the length of this field exceeded maximum load length. So of course you can easily prevent this by just making the field not accept more than 10 symbols, but in general, don't forget for error logging. Now, Web API is much more complicated thing, and if in your custom form something went wrong, especially when you're submitting data, it's really important for you to log the error, present it to user, but also be available for you to track it down, because Web API for now does not create error logs in Azure as native functionality did. Okay, so that was basically it. Let me sum it up again. So, so the main advantages of the Web API is ability to create complex and extended UI that you can work with and that your user will enjoy. But the dangers of using it is that you can abuse it and trade the extensibility of the portal main configuration components to control, which might be really bad exchange. And also error handling need to be a part of your development strategy, because if you don't show your user clues of something went wrong or don't handle it properly, you can use valuable information. Check out the references, so my blog, dancingwithcrm.com, official documentation, and excellent portal.js. Thank you so much for being here. It was really great to present here, and a YouTube video of this will be available in 2 weeks, so check it out if you miss it or you want to watch it, and have a nice day ahead. Cheers.